Hello, my name is Rob Terry, and in this video, I'd like to share about my story, about my history of sex addiction and healing, and how this Karuna Healing program got started. I spent about 30 years of my life feeling like I would never overcome sex addiction. I know what it feels like to be stuck, trapped in a cycle of shame, relapse, regret, and hopelessness. But I also know that real transformation is possible because I lived it. Like a lot of guys, my struggle started in my teen years. It began in a pretty normal way with masturbation and occasionally finding a porn magazine. I was raised in a strict religious environment where confessing sins to a church leader was expected. That cycle, acting out, feeling guilt, confessing, vowing to stop, and then relapsing again, created an intense shame addiction loop that shaped my entire young adulthood. I went to university, I got an MBA, started working in data analysis, business intelligence, and finance. I was good at analyzing trends, researching best practices, and optimizing processes in my career. I'm using those analytical skills to build this recovery program, but the one thing I could never figure out during all those years was how to fix myself. For those early years, I told myself, this will get better when I get married. This will go away when I have a real relationship. But like many of you have found out, that doesn't fix the problem. Each time I cycled through this process, my behaviors escalated from magazines to video porn to sexting to chatting relationships and eventually to full-blown infidelity. This is the escalating pattern a lot of men with sexually compulsive behavior have, and why it's important to address it early in this life cycle pattern. I started therapy and I joined 12-step groups, but nothing changed. The addiction just got worse. I cycled between intense recovery efforts and complete hopelessness. All these failed attempts at recovery made me believe I was incapable of change. That hopelessness really warped me. I started shifting into narcissism, entitlement, and delusion because those things protected me from my shame. I told myself stories to justify my behavior to help cope with the damage I was causing. I, During all my many years, I saw over a dozen therapists, tried different medications, I did outpatient programs, I went to many different 12-step groups, therapist-led groups. I spent over $20,000 on treatment, but nothing worked because no one was showing me the real work, or maybe also true, I was avoiding that work maybe. The deep emotional healing, attachment security, dealing with trauma, and confronting my shame head on. I even had a time period where a therapist told me to just accept myself. Maybe I'm not cut out for monogamy. It was everyone else with the problem, my wife, my church, society in general. It's common to go to a therapist that won't confront you on these sexual behaviors, but I blame myself because that's what I wanted to hear, and I sought out a therapist to validate that. I also went through a challenging faith crisis during that time that contributed to a destabilizing of my values and felt like it was separating me from peers in groups that were mostly faith-based approaches. Finally, about 5 years ago, my wife had had enough. She kicked me out. She told me we were done. That was it. No more second chances. That was my rock bottom. I lost everything. I was alone in a small house, lost my wife, lost respect to my children. No escape from the reality of what I had done. I sunk into severe depression and anxiety. I lost 15 pounds in just a few weeks. I couldn't sleep. I was suicidal. I called suicide hotline. That was the moment when something inside me finally shifted. I realized no one was coming to save me. There was no shortcut, no quick fix. If I wanted to live a life I could be proud of, I had to do the real work. If I wanted to live a life I could be proud of, I had to do the real work. I found the best therapist I could, someone who didn't just focus on behavior but understood trauma and attachment. Because of COVID, my business had slowed down, and gratefully I had time and resources to invest in recovery, so I went all in. Discovering IFS changed my entire perspective on addiction. Before, my recovery was just fighting urges, forcing myself to be good. IFS showed me that my addiction wasn't just about porn or sex, it was about parts of me that were wounded, terrified, and ashamed. There was a part of me that wanted to act out and a part of me that wanted to be a good husband and father. But they were at war. IFS taught me that healing isn't about shutting down parts of yourself. It's not about letting the good part win and shutting down that bad part. It's about integrating. It's about healing them and integrating them. I learned to connect with my inner child, to heal old wounds, and to finally stop flipping between shame and escape. I stopped just managing behavior and started healing my core wounds. Then I became so passionate about this work, I didn't just want to recover, I wanted to dedicate my life to this work. And that's when my analytical side kicked in. I spent my career building systems, solving business problems, finding the weak spots in processes, and I took that approach with the goal of developing the best sex addiction recovery program. I read over 200 books, hundreds of research papers. I started breaking down different therapy models, testing what worked, what didn't, and why. I started as a recovery coach and meditation teacher, but the more I worked with men, the more I saw trauma had to be treated for real healing to happen. So I went back to school, got my master's in counseling, and became a CSAT therapist. I spent the last 3 years working with men just like you, continuing to do therapy trainings and studying the best therapy models, tweaking my approach. Part of this time was spent 6 months working at an inpatient sex addiction rehab, learning the ins and outs of structured recovery. A year ago, I started the Karuna Healing 8-week intensive men's program. Most therapy for sex addiction is unstructured, hit or miss, and depends on finding the right therapist, which is very difficult to do. Inpatient treatment is great, but it's very expensive and impractical for a lot of people. Our 8-week program is intended to be the most effective, structured, research-backed program possible, delivering the best healing experience short of inpatient rehab. My goal in recovery was to become the kind of man when I'm 80 years old, I can look in the mirror and be proud of who I am and how I lived my life. I didn't feel that for most of my life. I do now, and I'm very grateful for this work. Thank you for watching to the end of this video. If you're ready to do the work, we'd love to work with you. Thanks.